I never thought saying no one time would end with a plate shattered beside my face and my daughter screaming that I was worthless. I had just dried a mug and set it upside down on the rack when she approached me. $5,000, my granddaughter had said, like it was nothing. She didn't even look up from her phone. For a bag. It's not even that much, Grandma, I chuckled. I thought it was a joke. She was 17, barely passing her classes, always scrolling TikTok or posting selfies with filters I didn't understand. I said, gently, I don't think that's something I can help with, honey. That's when she sighed like I'd disappointed her on some deep spiritual level, like I'd betrayed her. Everyone at school has one, she muttered. God, never mind, you're just useless. Before I could process that word, my daughter entered like a wave crashing through a door. I didn't even hear her footsteps. You said no, she asked, voice tight. I nodded, still confused. Just about a bag. I said I. The plate hit the wall to my right, hard. Ceramic exploded into the backsplash. I flinched but didn't cry out. My ears rang. She was already screaming again. You're just worthless without money, she shrieked. You think you're owed something because you raised me? Because you babysat a few times? Get out! You're not needed here! I froze. The room fell quiet except for the sound of the plate pieces clattering onto the floor and my own breath catching in my chest. Even my granddaughter looked shocked, but not enough to say anything. She just stared down into her phone like she couldn't be bothered. I looked around. The kitchen I helped remodel, the table I bought after her divorce, the fridge covered in photos I took. This wasn't just a kitchen. It was my second life, my penance, my pride. And now, it had turned against me. I didn't speak. I just stepped back, grabbed my purse off the counter. My hands were still damp. I didn't dry them. My daughter stood there, arms folded, daring me to fight, to scream, to beg. I did none of those things. I walked out. No slamming doors, no last words. Just the click of my heels against the hardwood and the sick echo of silence behind me. It was 3:47 p.m. I remember the time because I checked my phone in the driveway. It was raining lightly. My sweater was thin. I still had my apron on. I didn't even take it off. Not a single person followed me. Not my daughter. Not my granddaughter. I sat in my car for a long time. Long enough for the windows to fog and the cold to find its way through the seams in my sweater. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat, wondering how it came to this. Wondering if I had missed the signs. But the truth was, I hadn't missed anything. I had seen the signs for years. I drove to the nearest motel with my apron still on. And that was the moment everything changed. The walls were beige, the kind of beige that feels like giving up. There was a buzzing light above the sink that flickered every few seconds like it was thinking of dying. I lay on top of the thin motel blanket fully clothed, apron still bunched around my waist, staring at the ceiling like it held answers. It didn't. No one called. Not my daughter. Not my granddaughter. Not even a neighbor pretending to check in. I kept glancing at the phone like maybe it was broken. Like maybe it wasn't ringing because of a technical glitch, and not because the people I'd spent my whole life pouring into had simply decided I didn't matter anymore. It's a particular kind of ache, that silence. When you're not just alone, you've been left. Deliberately, strategically. The ceiling fan ticked rhythmically, and all I could think about was the last time I felt this small. When I was 17 and my father slammed the front door in my face for coming home pregnant, the ache in my chest now, it was the same shape. But this time, I had raised the person holding the door shut. I thought about my granddaughter. About how I'd rocked her to sleep in her first year, while her mother was still chasing night shifts and broken boyfriends. I was there when she had her first fever, when she got her first A, when she sobbed over a dance recital costume she thought made her look fat. I made her soup. I sewed the hem. I took the video. I was always there. And now she looked at me like I was an inconvenience. A card with a declining balance. Somewhere in the room, the mini fridge groaned to life. I jumped. My nerves were too frayed to handle even that. I got up, slowly, my bones heavy, and poured myself a cup of lukewarm tap water. I stared at the ripples in the glass like they might calm me. They didn't. My purse sat on the table, half-zipped. I opened it, pulled out the small leather envelope where I kept my emergency cash. Still there, $220, neatly folded. That was all I had on me. Everything else, my medicine, my documents, my heirlooms, were still in that house. My house. That's what I kept calling it in my head, even though I'd signed half of it over to her years ago, thinking it would make things easier. Easier for who? I blinked hard, jaw tight. What else had they taken? That question slithered up my spine like cold water. I hadn't thought to check the bank app. I hadn't checked anything, really, just walked out like a ghost. But my gut twisted now, warning me. I pulled out my phone and tried to log into my account. Password incorrect. I tried again. Still wrong. I knew that password. I'd used it for years. Had she changed it? I checked the email tied to the account. Locked out. The weight of it pressed down so fast I had to sit. They weren't just done with me. They were cutting me out. Financially, emotionally, legally maybe. It wasn't just a tantrum. It was a strategy. I was a fool. My throat burned, not from crying. I hadn't earned the tears yet. It was the burn of betrayal catching fire in my chest. My daughter hadn't just told me to leave. She had made sure I had nowhere to go back to. And my granddaughter, God, the same child I used to sing to in the car while she picked her nose and called me her best friend. She didn't even blink when I walked out. I sat there, staring at nothing, for what felt like hours. When the sun started to rise through the gap in the ugly motel curtains, I realized what I was really grieving wasn't just the loss of home. Tomorrow, I'd start digging, because something didn't feel right, and if I was already cast out like trash, then I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. The next morning, I walked to the nearest park. I thought about the day I signed the house papers over. Joint ownership, they called it. Made it sound practical, smart, future planning. She said it was. Just in case anything ever happened. Said it would make everything smoother when you're older. And I was tired, you know? I had just finished chemo back then, still weak in the knees. I wanted to believe she was helping. I wanted to believe she was the kind of daughter who thought that far ahead because she loved me. But now I saw it clearer. She'd been thinking ahead, yes, just not for me. I pulled out the little notepad I always kept in my purse. Used to write grocery lists in it, but that morning I wrote a different kind of list. Check bank accounts, call county clerk about the deed, find legal aid, meet up with Lorna, and if her son, a lawyer, can help. I underlined that last one, twice, because I wasn't stupid. I may have been trusting, soft, but not stupid. Something in my gut said they had gone further than I knew, and if I had even the smallest legal footing left under me, I'd find it, stand on it, and never let them take it again. I looked back at the dried-up fountain. In memory of Joy, I smiled bitterly. Joy wasn't dead. It was just missing. But I was going to find her again, even if it meant walking alone. And I'd stop handing out pieces of myself to people who never learned to say thank you. Not ever again. I wore the same cardigan from the night she kicked me out. Still smelled faintly of her perfume, the kind she buys with my credit card. The clerk behind the counter looked young enough to be my granddaughter, chewing gum like it was keeping her alive. She didn't look up when she asked, "What can I help you with today?" I slid the request form across the glass. Property records, 214 Minton Avenue. My name is Evelyn Harper. She clacked away on the keyboard, chewing all the while. You the owner or the co-signer? I hesitated. That's what I'm trying to confirm. She raised her brows, finally looking at me. Well, let's find out. A few more clicks and she hit print. The machine spat out 3 pages. She slid them to me like they didn't hold the weight of my entire life. I scanned the paper with hands that didn't quite stop shaking. There it was. Primary owner, Evelyn Harper. Secondary, Danielle Harper. My breath caught like I'd stepped into ice water. She never finished the transfer. She thought she had. She walked around like she had. Talked like that house was hers. Bragged about it at church, to her friends, to me when she was in a bad mood. But she never submitted the final deed, never filed the legal notice. The house My house was still mine. I closed my eyes and tried not to sob in public. All those years, she acted like she was doing me a favor, letting me stay in her home. The side comments, the condescending sighs, the, "You're lucky I don't charge you rent." And the whole time, she was squatting under my name. She was never the owner. Not legally. She was a guest. A presumptuous, ungrateful guest. Later that day, I met with my friend, Lorna. She sat across from me in that little booth by the window, same one we'd been meeting at since our kids were in diapers. Her silver curls bounced every time she shook her head, and this time, she was shaking hard. "You mean to tell me she's been strutting around acting like that house is hers, and it's not even in her name?" I nodded. "She never filed the final documents." Lorna let out a whistle, low and slow. "Well, sugar, the Lord works in documents and deadlines, that's what I always say." I managed a small laugh. First one in days. It felt unfamiliar in my throat. I sipped my tea, chamomile with a little honey, the only thing that didn't turn my stomach lately. "She's going to lose it when she finds out I know. She's not used to being questioned." "Let her," Lorna said. Her eyes were sharp now, like they always got when she smelled injustice. "She's gotten too comfortable treating you like a doormat. Maybe it's time she remembers who bought the damn door." That's the thing about Lorna. She doesn't offer pity. She offers clarity. And sometimes, that's more useful. "She called me a leech," I whispered. I hadn't said that part out loud to anyone yet. Saying it made it feel heavier, like it had weight in the air between us. Lorna didn't blink. She just reached across the table and laid her hand over mine. "Well, that's funny," she said softly. "Because the only leech I see is the one who's been draining you dry while painting her nails with your retirement fund." I looked down at her hand. She had liver spots like mine, faint tremors when she gripped her cup. But her grip was steady now, grounding. "She won't see it that way," I said. "No," Lorna agreed, "but a judge might." That made me pause. She leaned back. "My son. You remember Paul, right? He's got his own firm now. Family law and elder protection. He helped his wife's aunt when her daughter tried to take her Social Security checks. Quiet, efficient, and nobody ends up in jail unless they keep pushing." I looked at her, surprised. "You think I should get a lawyer?" She shrugged. "I think you should know your rights before she tramples over them again." Something shifted in me then. A small ember of possibility. I hadn't thought of it as a case. I'd thought of it as heartbreak, betrayal, pain I'd have to bury under politeness like I always did. But Lorna didn't see it that way. She saw it as theft, because that's what it was. "Give me his number," I said quietly. She smiled, triumphant. "Now that's the Evelyn I remember." We sat there another hour. Didn't talk about Danielle. Just shared stories about our grandkids, what a mess the city was making of traffic, how the bread pudding used to be better when Marcy still ran the kitchen. Normal talk. Easy talk. The kind of conversation I hadn't had in weeks. And as I walked back to my car with Paul's number folded in my pocket, I felt something new blooming in my chest. Not anger, not revenge, just steadiness. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to plan. The office was colder than I expected. Not unkind, just sterile. Neutral walls, neutral carpet, a single plant in the corner that looked better cared for than I'd been in years. Paul looked like the kind of man who didn't waste words. He didn't offer condolences or pleasantries, just nodded once when I walked in and said, "Let's talk about what's yours." I handed him the papers from the county office first. He read quickly, eyebrows barely moving until the last page. "She never filed her end," he said flatly. "That's lucky." "Or divine," I offered. My voice sounded too quiet in the room. "Either way, you are the legal owner of the house. And from what you've told me, she doesn't have a lease or a claim. You let her live there. You didn't sign anything that gives her permanent rights." I nodded slowly. "So I can ask her to leave?" "Yes," he said, "but not in anger, not over text or screaming matches. You do it properly. You file a formal 30-day notice to vacate. You send it certified. You document everything. You're not just someone's mother now. You're a landlord, Reclaiming your home. That word stuck with me. Landlord. I'd been everything else. Babysitter, maid, nurse, bank, but never that. He explained the next steps while I took notes, scribbling in my shaky handwriting. Certified mail 30-day notice. Keep all records. Do not engage emotionally. Do not engage emotionally, I repeated, like a prayer. He looked at me then, really looked. Not the way people sometimes glance at old women like we're just furniture with opinions. He looked at me like I was still a person. She's going to try to twist it, he said. Frame it as abandonment or elder confusion. Maybe even claim you're being manipulated. She already does, I said. Calls me a leech. Tells people I'm bitter. Says she gave me everything. He raised a brow. Did she? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He tapped the property form. This is your backbone now. This and your documentation. Start gathering anything financial. Bank statements, account access, any messages where she implies ownership or makes threats. I nodded. And be careful, he added. They may not leave quietly. That part one already knew. I'd lived through their noise, the entitlement, the guilt trips, the subtle gaslighting disguised as help. I won't tell them yet, I said. I want to move smart, quiet. Paul gave a small, satisfied nod. Good. Most people make the mistake of announcing their plan. You wait. You prepare. Then you strike. Not with fists. With facts. Facts. That's what I had now. For the first time in months, maybe years, I had something they didn't expect. Leverage. I left the office with a copy of the form in my bag, a folder of resources, and a strange calm in my chest. No rage. No desperation. Just quiet resolve. The next morning, I came to the house to gather my things. The house felt different without them in it. Quieter, yes, but not peaceful. Cold. Like even the walls were pretending not to recognize me anymore. I still had a key. She hadn't thought to change the locks. Probably assumed I was too broken to come back. Too humiliated to cross the threshold. But I did. Middle of the afternoon. Her car was gone. Granddaughter at school. The driveway was clear. So I parked down the street and walked like I belonged, like I wasn't sneaking back into a life I paid for. Inside, it looked the same. Almost. My teapot was gone from the stove, replaced by one of those ugly glass kettles she always said made better coffee. The picture of me and my granddaughter at her 5th birthday, replaced with a gold-framed selfie of them at the beach. My books were boxed, labeled Mom's junk. I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the stack. One of the boxes was half open. Inside, my birth certificate, my wedding photo, a bundle of yellowing tax documents tied with a rubber band. She hadn't thrown them away. She was keeping them, like maybe I'd die soon and she'd need them. I walked to the bedroom I used to sleep in. Guest room, she called it. I called it my room. Still had my quilt on the bed. Still smelled like the lavender sachets I tucked in every drawer. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. I moved quickly. I took what mattered. My pension papers, my old checkbooks, the photo albums with my husband's handwriting in the margins, the jewelry box with the chipped corner she used to call vintage when she bragged about me to her friends. I didn't touch her things, didn't snoop, didn't take what wasn't mine. Because that was the difference between us. She stole, I reclaimed. Before I left, I opened the hallway closet and reached behind the shoeboxes. My grandmother's rosary beads, still there, tucked inside an envelope I labeled, "Do not touch." She hadn't. That surprised me. Maybe she didn't know their worth. Or maybe she just didn't want what she couldn't cash. I put them in my coat pocket and stood at the door for a moment, one hand resting on the knob. I wanted to slam it, wanted to make noise, the kind that said, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." But I didn't. I closed it softly. Outside, I called the locksmith from the sidewalk. We set the appointment for next week. "Want to change all the locks?" the man asked. "Yes," I said, clear and steady. "All of them." I walked back to the motel with my bag heavy and my chest oddly light, not because I'd taken back everything, but because I'd left nothing behind that she could still use against me. Later that night, I laid the photo albums out on the motel bed. The pictures from when she was small, missing teeth, pigtails, fingers sticky with frosting, looked like someone else's child now. Someone I would have died for. Someone I did die for. A little. Every day. Until now. I slipped the albums back into the bag and zipped it shut. Because I wasn't here to grieve her anymore. I was here to evict her. Not just from my house. From my heart. The motel room smelled like stale detergent and burnt coffee, but it was quiet. For a while. Then my phone lit up. First, it was a text. From an unknown number. "You're so selfish. Hope the money keeps you warm when you're alone in a nursing home." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't reply. Then another. "You betrayed your own blood. What kind of grandmother treats her family like strangers?" Still, I said nothing. Then came the post. My granddaughter, the one I diapered, the one I taught to tie her shoes, the one who used to call me her favorite person in the world, had posted a photo on Instagram. It was a black and white picture of her at the kitchen table, fake tears on her cheeks, captioned, "When you give your whole life to a greedy grandma who only cares about money flying money heartbreak, hashtag cutting toxicity, hashtag family doesn't third." Dozens of comments. Her friends, strangers, teenagers with usernames like SoxoBBYGRL and Sad Girl Chronicles cheering her on. Ugh, I feel this so hard. Some people don't deserve your kindness. You're better off without her. She sounds like a narcissist. I felt like I was choking. She was painting me as a villain. A villain. After everything. After every ballet practice. Every doctor's appointment. Every night I stayed up rubbing her back when she was too scared to sleep. They didn't know the woman who skipped meals to cover tuition bills. They didn't know the grandmother who pawned her wedding ring to fix the damn roof so water wouldn't drip on their heads. All they saw was the story she handed them. A one-sided tale of a bitter old woman who refused to share. And my daughter, God help me, she joined in. A post of her own. A photo of wine glasses clinking. A fireplace in the background. Cheers to new beginnings. Some bridges are meant to burn. Burn. She wanted the world to know she'd scorched me. My hands trembled as I sat on the motel bed, phone glowing in the dark. My ears buzzed with silence. That awful, choking silence that comes when you realize the people you loved most have rehearsed your funeral behind your back. More texts came. From her boyfriend. From her friends. Even one from an old cousin who hadn't spoken to me since 1998. All asking what I'd done to deserve this. I didn't reply to any of them. I wasn't going to fight with ghosts. But I saved everything. Screenshotted each post. Downloaded the comments. Printed the photos the next morning at the motel lobby computer. Because I'd learned something in the last few days. When people lie loud enough, you don't match their volume. You match them with proof. My proof didn't need hashtags or followers. It had stamps, signatures, screenshots, and a notarized deed. They could shame me on the internet all they wanted. But I'd be waiting at the courthouse, and when the time came, when the door locked behind them and they looked around with nowhere to go, I wouldn't say a word. I'd let the paperwork speak. It was Tuesday bingo at the senior community center, and I went because I needed to sit in a room where no one expected me to justify my existence. I didn't dress up, just wore my cardigan, combed my hair, and brought the envelope with my documents. Not because I needed them, but because they felt like armor now. They called me Miss Evelyn at the front desk. The volunteer handed me a bingo card and smiled like she meant it, like I was someone, not something. I sat next to a woman with bright red glasses and a cane that sparkled with rhinestones. Her name was Dolores. She smelled like lilac and resilience. "You knew?" she asked, eyes sharp despite the smudged mascara. "Just visiting," I said. She grinned. "Aren't we all?" We didn't talk about family at first. Just bingo, the weather, the cookies that tasted like cardboard but felt like home. But halfway through the third round, something in me cracked open. "My granddaughter called me a leech online," I said, barely above a whisper. Dolores didn't flinch. She just nodded. "My grandson stole my social security number and used it to lease a Tesla." Another woman at the next table leaned in. My son tried to sell my house while I was in the hospital. Told the nurse I had dementia. I looked around. One by one, heads nodded. Some eyes filled. Others just looked tired, like they'd been holding stories too long. "You're not alone," Dolores said, setting her marker down. "You're just finally seeing the truth." I didn't cry, but I exhaled, and it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in weeks. They didn't pity me, they recognized me. And something about that made me feel taller. 7 days later, I finally did it. I stood in the driveway, envelope in hand, locksmith van parked behind me. The officer leaned against his cruiser across the street, arms folded, sunglasses on. Just there to make sure everything stayed legal. Because it was legal. I was the owner. The document said so. The notice had been delivered. The grace period had passed. Now it was action time. I took one last look at the house. The chipped porch I painted 3 summers ago, the window box where I used to plant petunias with my granddaughter, the dent in the siding from where my daughter threw a wine bottle during one of her tantrums. It was my house. Always had been. But today, I was reclaiming more than property. I was reclaiming place. The locksmith, a tall man with calloused hands and kind eyes, gave me a small nod. "You ready?" I nodded back. "Change them all." He got to work without a word. The first turn of the screwdriver into the front lock sounded louder than thunder. I posted the formal notice to the door in clear view. Laminated, stamped, signed. The kind of thing that couldn't be denied with crocodile tears or screaming matches. I heard them before I saw them. The car pulled up fast. My daughter's silver SUV screeching into the curb like it was her driveway still. My granddaughter in the passenger seat, phone in hand, lips already curled. "What the hell are you doing?" my daughter barked, stepping out. The officer straightened. He didn't speak, just looked at me. "This is my house," I said, calm, even, practiced. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "We live here. My stuff is in there." I turned toward the officer. The legal documents were sent. Notice was served. Grace period passed. He nodded once. "You're within your rights." My daughter stared at him like he'd just betrayed her personally. Then she turned on me. "After everything I've done for you, are you serious right now?" That was the moment I almost laughed. "Done for me?" I asked, stepping forward. "You mean the years I paid your rent? Raised your daughter while you went out drinking? Or maybe the time you used my savings to buy a couch and said I was investing in our home?" Her face twisted, but she had no words. And my granddaughter, the same one who called me a leech online, finally spoke. "This is elder abuse." I smiled. Not a cruel smile, a tired one. "No, sweetheart. What you've been doing to me for years, that's elder abuse. This is just a lock change." The locksmith finished the front door, moved on to the back. My daughter was pacing now, pulling out her phone, threatening to call a lawyer, the police, her boyfriend, as if any of them could reverse a legally binding deed and 30 days of silence. "Where are we supposed to go?" she demanded. I shrugged. "The same place you expected me to go when you screamed at me to get out." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Not this time. No manipulations. No sweet apologies followed by, "But," just silence. I walked past her, slow and steady, keys in hand. I didn't rush, didn't flinch. The locksmith handed me the new key with a quiet, "It's done." And it was. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. For the first time in weeks, I was home. Not in a motel, not in memories, but in my home. Alone, yes, but not powerless. And from the inside, I couldn't hear their yelling anymore. All I heard was the sound of a lock clicking shut. The silence was almost too loud. Not the kind of silence that follows heartbreak. I'd already lived through that. This was something different. This was the kind of quiet that holds its breath, waiting to see what you'll do next. I sat in my old recliner, the one with the patch on the armrest from years of tea spills and grandbaby elbows. My quilt was still draped over the back. The house felt unfamiliar in its stillness. No stomping upstairs, no slam of cabinet doors, no reality TV echoing from the living room while my daughter cleared her head. Just dust and a sunbeam, and the creak of a settling home. But peace doesn't mean safe. Not always. Because they were still here. I could hear them. Not in the open. Not storming through rooms like they used to, but behind doors. Whispering. They hadn't left. My daughter claimed they needed time to gather their things. Legally, I couldn't force them out with the locks changed. Not yet. The eviction clock was ticking, but they were clinging to every minute like barnacles on a ship they never built. I kept my door locked. They stayed to the back bedrooms, slithering through the hall when I wasn't looking. But I heard the printer at night, the hushed phone calls, the bathroom door locking for an hour at a time. I knew that tone. I knew the rhythm of planning. They weren't accepting anything. They were strategizing. I found one of my bank statements in the trash can outside, ripped in half. I never threw that away. I checked my purse. Everything was still there. But I knew that look in her eyes, the one she used to give herself in the mirror before lying to her boss or forging a doctor's note. She was preparing something. A story. A case. A final act of desperation. I was no longer just a mother who said no. I was an obstacle. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I didn't knock on their doors. I didn't ask what they were up to. Didn't tiptoe. Didn't try to mediate one more false truce. I brewed my tea in silence and left the house without a word. Because I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I was going to finish this. Paul met me at his office, folder already waiting on the table, pen uncapped beside it. He'd been expecting me. I want to change everything, I said. Will, accounts, mail forwarding. Everything they had access to, cut it off. He nodded. We'll start with the will. I didn't hesitate. Line by line, we removed my daughter's name, then my granddaughter's. Then we reworded the clauses to protect what little I had left from being scavenged after I was gone. I wasn't just disinheriting them, I was breaking the cycle. This would stop with me. Paul handed me a new copy of the trust document too, the one protecting the house. We added a clause, no future transfer, without independent legal review. No last-minute switches. No hospital bed signatures disguised as help. Then the bank. I closed the joint account they used to help pay the bills, which, of course, I'd funded entirely. We opened a new one. Private, secure, linked to my legal trust. I updated my mailing address. I rerouted every bill, every pension check, every correspondence to my P.O. box and my lawyer's office. Not even junk mail would touch that house again. By the end of the appointment, my entire life, financial, legal, logistical, had been rewritten. Rewritten by me. Paul looked up from the stack of forms. You're quiet, he said. I nodded. It's not sadness. It's relief. Because I realized something as I signed that last page. They couldn't touch me anymore. Not really. 2 weeks later, I met someone I didn't expect to meet. I wasn't even supposed to be at that supermarket. My usual place was closed for fumigation, and I didn't want to wait another day to buy tomatoes. It was supposed to be a simple trip. In and out. Quiet. But nothing in my life stayed simple anymore. I was reaching for a can of beans when I heard someone say my name, the old way, soft, surprised. Evelyn? I turned. And there he was. Rick. My daughter's ex-husband, the man she divorced after 5 years and 4 restraining orders, the man I hadn't seen since my granddaughter was in kindergarten. He looked older, thinner, but not worn down like I was, just tired. We stared at each other for a moment. I didn't know you were still in town, he said. I didn't know you were still breathing, I replied before I could stop myself. He laughed. It was genuine. Fair. We stood in that aisle for a minute. Then he looked at me, eyes narrowing. I heard what happened. Danielle's been talking. Of course she had. She told people you're senile, he said. Says you're not well, that you're confused, maybe unsafe. I froze. My stomach dropped like someone had ripped the floor from under me. She said what? She's telling folks you forgot things, left the stove on, wandered outside in your nightgown. That you threatened her, screamed out of nowhere. That never happened. I whispered. I know, he said. I told her to stop. Said she was playing with fire. I leaned against the cart. This wasn't just scheming. She was building a case, preparing to go to court, to try to have me declared unfit, mentally compromised, legally incompetent. That's how she'd win the house back. Not with a signature, with a diagnosis. I shook my head slowly, more stunned than angry. She wasn't just ungrateful. She was dangerous. Rick sighed. She's always been like that. It's why I left. I didn't reply. What could I say? You think you know someone when you raise them. You think blood means loyalty. That if you love them hard enough, feed them long enough, cry for them often enough, they'll never turn on you. But love doesn't stop a knife from sinking in. He looked at me again, more gently this time. Do you have a lawyer? I do, I said. Good. Keep everything documented. She's trying to make it look like you've lost it. Don't let her. I nodded. I won't, and I meant it. Because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was a war. But I wasn't a fragile woman anymore. I asked him her address and went straight to her. I didn't want another shouting match. Didn't want her crocodile tears, or that smirk she wore when she thought she'd won. But after what Rick told me, I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, could barely sit still without hearing the echo of her voice telling someone I was losing it. She wanted to write me off as unstable, so I showed up more steady than I've ever been. She had moved into a new apartment 2 days after the locks were changed. Some cheap complex off the freeway, curtains still pinned with thumbtacks, trash cans overflowing in the breezeway. I stood at her door with the sun baking my shoulders and my fingers curled tight around a folder. She opened the door like she was expecting a pizza. That fake little smile died the second she saw me. Oh, she said flatly. You got a minute? I asked. She hesitated, probably calculating, probably wondering if I brought a witness, a threat, a weapon. I brought none of those, just the truth. She let me in. The place reeked of cheap candles and fried food. My granddaughter was sprawled on the couch, phone in hand, earbuds in. She didn't even look at me. Good. I sat down at the dining table. She stayed standing, arms crossed, defensive already. Rick told me what you're doing, I said. No reaction, just a little twitch in her jaw, saying I'm senile, telling people I'm confused, unstable, getting your story lined up before you take me to court. She scoffed. That's not what Don't, I said quietly. You don't get to lie to me. Not anymore. Her mouth opened, but I cut her off, reached into my folder and laid down the papers one by one. This is the deed, still in my name. This is the will. You're not in it. This is the trust. You can't touch it. This, I said, tapping the last document, is a notarized log of everything you've said, posted, and threatened. With dates, screenshots, witnesses. Her face paled. You want to take me to court? I said. Try. You'll lose. You're just doing this because I asked for help, she spat. You screamed in my face. You smashed a plate. You called me worthless. It was one fight. No, it was the last one. There's a difference. She started pacing now, hands shaking. You think you're better than me? No, I said, but I'm better without you. That hit. It hit hard. I stood, slow and steady. I came here to tell you one thing, I said. If you try to come after me again, with false claims, with gossip, with lawsuits, I will bring every record, every message, every dollar spent, every damn bruise you left on this family's peace, and I will put it in front of a judge. Her eyes filled then. Tears? Maybe. Rage? Definitely. You're my mother. I was. Now I'm my own. I turned to the door. After that, my granddaughter hasn't messaged again. Neither has Danielle. I don't expect them to. And for the first time, I don't need them to. They're waiting for me to fold, probably. Waiting for time to soften me, for memory to blur out the betrayal. But time hasn't made me forget. It's made me sharper. Because once you've been thrown out by someone you built your life around, the shock burns away every illusion. And all that's left is the truth. They loved the version of me that paid, the version that apologized first, even when I was the one bleeding, the version who mistook silence for survival. But that version is buried, right next to every receipt, every birthday gift given out of obligation, every insult I swallowed just to keep the peace. Now I plant. I wake up early, brew my coffee, pull weeds. I write letters, real ones with stamps, to friends I'd nearly lost track of. I sit under the porch light when it's too hot to sleep and listen to the cicadas talk about nothing. And in those small, uneventful moments, I feel something I haven't felt in decades. Free. Not because I won, not because I hurt them back, but because I